Okay, so thank you guys all for coming today. Really appreciate it. We're excited to do this one. So we've kind of been working on our presentations and things like that, just so we could get them more accurate and more helpful to you guys. So here we are today with growing and cooking summer style. So a couple of people have actually emailed me just recently what you could grow in the summer, I think because, I was linked to that. So Anne has lots of answers for you. So that's what we're talking about today. And so here we are. So I'm on the left and then Anne is on the right. And so I work with nutrition. I'm the family and consumer sciences agent and I'm a registered dietitian. And then Anne's the residential horticulture agent and master gardener coordinator. So she knows a lot about growing. And then my expertise would be cooking and the nutrition. So we're going to combine those to hopefully make a really good webinar for you guys. So just if you haven't used Teams yet, I don't know, then just if you need to use the chat box or anything like that, which can be very helpful, you can kind of hover over either the bottom or the top of the screen and a bar should show up. And then you can push that ... and there'll be more and where you can see that, or you might have it just a little icon that says chat. So then you can type things in and we'll try to look there, especially at the end for questions and things like that. And I think that's it on that. And then we made a short survey just to kind of see, what you guys are getting out of this and what you like and what you don't like. So I'm going to hopefully get that out to you as soon as I can after the webinar. And if you don't mind filling it out, be very grateful. I really appreciate your feedback. So at that point, Anne, you can take it away. I'm going to see if I can make sure that you can do that. Are you able to request permission? Okay, we got it.
All right. Did you get my remote? Okay, I'm good. All right. All right. Well, thanks, Andrea. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So this is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to talk about some basics in planting a vegetable garden. We'll talk about what you can grow seasonally. And so today we'll be talking about what you can grow this summer. It's not the longest list, but there are things you can be growing. Other things you can do as well. And then we'll talk about harvesting, preserving, and how to prepare, cook what you are going to be harvesting. Okay, so I'm going to talk about growing. So I am doing all the growing and selection part, and then when we get to Andrea, she'll talk about the preparing. And then we'll take obviously questions in the chat box, but we'll take those at the end. So you can type them in now, but if you want to wait, we'll get them at the end so as to not interrupt the presentation. So just a little bit about growing edible plants in the summer. Growing vegetables in the Florida summer can be hard. Hot, muggy temperatures can lead to increase of insect and disease problems, which can be hard to manage in other times of year as well. High night temperatures mean no summer tomatoes. So this is not the time of year where you're used to growing them in other places around the country. You won't be growing those big tomatoes here in Florida. Look for crops that are native to Southeast Asia or the Caribbean, and then what we'll discuss today as well for what can be grown in our hot, humid summer. And not only is the heat tough on vegetable crops, it's tough on you as well. So remember to be safe as you work in your garden this summer, no matter what you're doing. All right, we're going to talk, looks like I advanced a little too far. We're going to talk a little bit about site prep and planning. So right from the very beginning, all the way through the plants that you can select and grow now. So when you're preparing to plant and grow vegetables, no matter the season, it is important to make sure that your site growing conditions are suited to what you're going to grow. So whether containers, raised beds, in the ground, grown without soil using hydroponics, you need to provide those plants with what they need to be successful. So there might be multiple options that will work for you or just one. And it really, is on a case-by-case basis as far as what you have in your yard. So vegetables will either need to be grown in well-drained soil. You can purchase that or create your own potting mix. If you do any composting, that can be easy and a free thing you can do. They'll also need sun. So make sure if you're selecting a location that that spot gets about 6 hours of sunlight per day. Less than that can reduce your crop yield. So you may get some crop, but not enough maybe to make it worth your while. So do some monitoring in your landscape to make sure you're getting that 6 hours of sun. For yards with partial sun, you might look to herbs. There are some herbs that can grow in partial sun, and that might be an option. And then finally, when you're selecting a location and prepping for your garden, make sure that it's going to be easy for you to maintain and harvest your garden. So anything that you can do to make it easier for you will make vegetable gardening a lot more appealing. So think about things like locating the vegetables near a water source, so it's easy for you to water. If you routinely need gardening tools, make sure you keep those right by the garden, easily accessible. Put your compost bin at arm's length so that you can add materials from your garden easily and then add that compost right back into your garden as well. And then when you're ready to harvest, make that trip to the harvest easy. So what I mean by that is, if you're in the kitchen working, is it easy for you to run out and grab something, or is it going to be too much work? You know, I got to put on shoes, I got to go out this door and go out into the yard and, you know, grab this or that, and make sure it's easy for you to want to use what you are growing. And finally, just like with all your plants in your landscape, make sure you have enough room to grow what you've decided to grow. You can always expand if needed. So following those general guidelines to help you will get you started on the right foot. So where can you grow? What kind of sites? And I mentioned these already. So what kind of places can you look to grow your vegetables? Well, one is containers, and you can see lots of different types of containers will work for lots of different types of vegetables. Anything from a bucket to a fancy planting pot will work. You can also grow directly into the ground. Now, you probably want to make sure that your soil is good for that sort of growing. Do a soil pH test before. Make sure you're amending the soil for sure. But in the ground is a great option, particularly for things that you see in this picture that take up a lot of space. You know, you're probably not going to be growing Seminole pumpkin or squash or something like that, watermelon in a container, right? You can also grow in raised beds. These are a favorite of a lot of people. Again, lots of different styles, materials, shapes, sizes, heights, all of those things with a raised bed. And again, whatever works for you is nice. I like this picture in the middle here because it shows both raised beds and containers, because it is good to know that, you know, many times you want to do a couple of these methods, a couple of these different sorts of growing methods in one place. Hydroponic systems are also very popular. These on the right feature some homemade hydroponic systems, and you can certainly purchase them as well. And hydroponic simply means growing without soil. So there are other ways to grow plants there. And then, of course, you can grow your edible plants right into the landscape. Many are very ornamental, and so they work very well in the landscape with your, you know, regular landscape plants. So consider that as well. After you've selected a site and determined how you will grow your vegetables, it's really helpful to create a plan. So just like you would for your landscape, you can make a list of the supplies you'll need, utilize a gardening journal. Our Master Gardener volunteers have written and published a 12-month garden guide and journal. It's about 90 pages, and that will be very helpful in monitoring, recording, planning. Each month features a vegetable, an edible garden planting guide, so you'll know what you need if you utilize that. And you can use those guides year to year, which is really helpful. Whether you decide to use that guide or even a notebook, just recording your successes and failures and things you noticed from year to year is super important. And so you can get that garden guide from our office. You can order it through the mail. You can purchase it at the Nectary Nursery in Lakeland and at the Polk Museum of Art in Lakeland as well. So those are for sale item, but again, you can use a planner, a notebook, but recording is super important in a vegetable garden. When you're creating your plan, you need to also make a note for what you're planting each season and rotate your crops. Again, another really important reason for kind of recording what you do each season in the garden, so that you make sure that you're rotating and you make sure that you know what you have planned in that area is not planted in the same spot season to season. We do have a couple of fact sheets that are going to be really helpful to you, so you don't have to look all these plant families up every time that you plant. And so this is from our vegetable crop rotation fact sheet that you can find on our website. And this just lists all the families across the top, and then the common vegetables in the column. And obviously it's not every single vegetable that you can grow, but because when you rotate out of that plant family, not just to a different crop. This is kind of a cheat sheet for you. So if you look at the Brassicaceae family that lists lots of those greens like arugula, turnip, mustard, all those, you can't rotate from arugula to mustard. You need to rotate from arugula to melon. So totally out of that family. And this fact sheet will help you out. In that same fact sheet, there's a sample crop rotation plan. But again, you know, making these notations seasonally or in your garden guide or journal planner, whatever you use is going to be very helpful. So as you get to your site, it's important to prepare when you're getting to the point of planting. So if you look at the addition of organic matter, you might want to prep the soil a few months in advance, particularly if you're, you know, planting right into the ground. You know, you want to make sure that that site is prepped, and then you get your pH to figure out if there's anything else you need to do. Our Master Gardener volunteers also test pH out of our office. It's $3. And they do a simple pH test. They do not make recommendations if there needs to be adjustment in the pH. That would be done through the Soils Lab in Gainesville. And you can get soil tests done through the Soils Lab as well. You can mail samples to them and they'll give you recommendations for maybe additions that you need to make in your soil. So we want to make sure if we're adding organic matter that we add that into our garden beds, ground, planter, whatever we're doing, about 3 weeks prior to planting. Anything that's uncomposted organic material, you need to add 30 days from planting. Any animal manures, if you're adding those animal manures directly to the garden bed, I'm not talking about the compost, those need to be added 90 to 120 days from planting. I always suggest that all of that stuff just get added to your compost pile, and then the compost can be added anytime into your planting beds. Makes it a little bit easier, but you can, I mean, you certainly can do it if you want. In looking at soil, if you're planting in containers, you'll need to start, you'll need to purchase or, you know, mix your own well-drained soil. Remember, those containers need to have proper drainage in the bottom. Sometimes that means drilling a couple more holes if there's 1 or 2 in there already. You'll also have to replace that soil in the containers annually. And then there is the option for hydroponic gardening, which is soilless. And we talk about that in a whole separate webinar. So we've talked about planning. We've selected a site. We talked about soil prep, getting that pH and everything ready to go. And again, this is all prior to selecting what plants you're going to put in your garden. You need to make a plan for irrigation. So it's really important that those vegetable plants get water. We are not in the rainy season. We really, really could use some rain quite badly. And so if you're growing vegetables now, you definitely need to be watering them. Ideally, the summer garden is getting going and then it starts to rain and you'll have less of this to deal with, but micro irrigation is an easy to install option for vegetable gardens. So they'll help reduce water use by saving money and conserving water because they're very low flow. They can potentially reduce disease, weeds, pest problems because of the way that the water is applied. You can simply install them on an outdoor hose bib with a small timer, so something pretty easy to do. And they're very flexible. You can expand, add to, reconfigure over time. There's lots of options for those micro irrigation systems. So here's some photos showing micro irrigation used in edible gardens. On the top left, you can see micro irrigation going from PVC pipe into the raised beds. The top right photo, you can see kind of a sample design with micro irrigation coming off the faucet there on the side of the house. The bottom left photo, you can see micro irrigation being used to irrigate containers. It's a great option for containers because they tend to dry out pretty quickly. And then in the bottom right photo, you can see how raised beds are being prepped to use micro irrigation. That's little PVC in the middle there. Okay, so we've got all that prep work done, and now we can look at figuring out what to plant. This is from another one of our fact sheets that shows vegetable garden crop planting and harvesting dates. So the harvesting dates are in orange and the planting dates have the little X's in the box. So that what that means is during that month where there's an X, you could be planting something. And if you look at summer, there are not a lot of little checked boxes there. There are a few, and those are the vegetables that we're going to talk about today. All right, our first one is okra. Lots of people are very familiar with what okra looks like. Although I was talking to someone at the City of Lakeland Parks and Rec the other day, and they had a new okra that is not like this typical, kind of oblong look. It's round. So I'm really interested to see what that looks like. They also have some fun colors. You can see the green and kind of the burgundy color. Okra is actually very pretty as a plant. You can see it in the far right. It's a very tall shrub. I mean, it's going to get 4 to 6 feet tall, has very pretty flowers on it. So, this could be a good option for planting right in your landscape with other plants. It's 60 days to harvest. You can start seeds March through April, transplants through July, harvest early and often. So we want to get those pods when they're 2 to 3 inches long. So you need to be ready for continual harvest on those because we don't want to let those go. Those are certainly something you want to make sure you're checking and harvesting when it's that smaller size. And again, that plant is going to get big. So it's really important that you have enough space for okra. Our next one is sweet potatoes, and they also take up a lot of space, but they take up a different amount of space. They're going to grow like a ground cover along the ground. So this could be another one that you allocate maybe one whole section of a raised bed, or, this is the plant you decide to grow as a ground cover in the landscape or in the ground directly because of the way that it will cover. It's 85 to 130 days to harvest. You can plant it February through June, so it has a pretty wide range of planting. You start the plants with slips, and you can purchase those plants. So get a certified disease-free slips, and then after harvest, you can cure them for a couple of weeks in a dark space to kind of increase sweetness there. So this is a edible sweet potato. You can actually eat the sweet potatoes from the ornamental sweet potato vine as well. They are very different tasting though. All right, many people familiar with peas. There are a ton of different type of southern peas that can be grown. You can start planting them in the garden in April all the way through summer. 75 to 90 days to harvest. This is another one you need to harvest frequently. You'll continually get production. You want to make sure you're harvesting at the right size. And they are just an easy one to start from seed in the landscape. And there's just, again, a lot of varieties available. When we have some good information on all of those different varieties, if you're interested in trying a different type of southern pea. So I said you can't grow any tomatoes in the landscape, in the edible garden in Florida in the summer, but you can grow cherry tomatoes. So if you really need a summertime tomato, you can do the cherry tomatoes. So any of the cherry tomatoes, the sun golden yellow pear are fun to grow in the hot summer months. They're 90 days to harvest. You can start them May through August. You can start seeds in July and get those transplants in the ground in August. Most cherry tomato varieties are indeterminate. And so tomatoes will be either determinate or indeterminate. Determinate means that they only produce one crop, whereas indeterminate, if you've grown cherry tomatoes before, you'll know they continually produce fruit over, a couple of months period of time. So again, this is another one you'll be continually harvesting as you have it growing in the landscape and hopefully getting more and more tomatoes from it. This is an interesting one. So this is actually Jerusalem artichoke or sunchoke. And you can see there in the middle, those are the tubers that are actually the part of the plant that's edible. So usually when you have something large like that, it's, takes a while to harvest. So this is 130 days to harvest. You can start them growing in April. They do have a really attractive above ground plant. So you can see both in the picture on the left and all the way on the right. It has those pretty yellow flowers, and then the plant itself will grow about 6 to 10 feet tall. So this is another one, kind of like the okra. You do need to give it space, and I think would make a really good ornamental plant in the landscape as well. So it's always nice when you can get kind of a bonus there. All right, just like our southern peas, there's lots and lots of varieties of peppers as well. So, you can choose what you like to grow as far as peppers. 60 to 80 days to harvest if you're starting from transplants, 80 to 100 if you're starting from seed. Both work, just fine in the garden here. So lots of varieties available. They are smaller plants, so these are good for containers. You can put a pepper in a container and grow it pretty easily. And then we have eggplant, 90 to 115 days to harvest. Lots of varieties, shapes and sizes and colors of eggplant, which is really fun. It's really fun that they have so many new varieties of all of these different types of vegetables. It just makes it a lot more exciting to grow. And I think, there's probably a lot of really interesting things you can do with all of them in the kitchen as well. So you can start seeds in March and keep planting them through summer. They are self-pollinated. Bees can assist. So we like to provide for our pollinators and bees in our gardens and in our landscapes. So if you have any pollinating or pollinator loving plants nearby, that's always a great thing to grow near your vegetable garden. So how do you know when your summer garden is done? You may be done before your plants are done. You may just say, it's too hot. I don't want to go out there anymore. And that's totally fine. But most gardeners remove their crops when they kind of stop producing. So it might be July. Nothing has an exact number of days or months that it's going to produce. Some things hang on a lot longer than others. It just kind of depends on, how much time and effort you put into them and, where they're planted and all of that. Some just have a longer growing season too. Things like sweet potatoes, those can go for a pretty long time. So what you could do when you're getting towards the end of your summer crop, you can collect seeds for next warm season planting. You may want to end things a bit early just so your soil you have time to prep your soil for fall, because maybe you want to grow a lot more stuff in the fall and you want to really make sure your garden is clean and prepped for fall. You may want to also take the time in June and July to solarize your soil. And that's what you see in the picture on the right. And we have instructions on how you can do that. And the reason you may want to solarize your soil is to eradicate or kill off any diseases or pests that may be in your soil. So if you have nematode issues, things that come about maybe when you haven't rotated crops quite as often, that's certainly something you can do. You do not have to solarize your soil. if you spend a lot of time building your soil profile, you may not want to solarize because it will kill off everything, even the good stuff that's in there. And you just remove all the debris, till up the soil, clear plastic that's secured, and let that sit for 6 weeks. And then maintenance and pest control in your vegetable garden. There's, lots we could say on this. Many of our cultural practices can affect the health of our garden. So we want to make sure we're using proper irrigation techniques and not overwatering. We want to allow for good drainage to encourage healthy plants. We want to grow our plants in the proper soil pH for vegetable gardens so that we can, minimize nutrient related issues. And our proper pH for vegetables is 5.5 to 7. So it is different than what you may find in your landscape. Just simply keeping your garden area tidy makes a big difference in what may become a problem with pest control. So proper spacing, keeping weeds down, clean rows, removal of any crowded plants, dead plants, things are not really producing anymore. That can really help reduce pests. Mulch may also help keep pests down, keeping weeds down as well. And then just remember the importance of crop rotation again, that will really help. So all of these types of cultural things, these things that you're doing will help with your maintenance and pest control. Okay, so we've talked about everything from planning to maintenance and watering. And now we can talk about how to enjoy our summer harvest with Andrea.
How if I unmute myself? Thank you. And okay, so just talking about the summer harvest then and what you could do. So I know that you guys are, intelligent people, and you probably know you can just eat a tomato. So I'm not going to talk about those kind of things, but trying to think about something other than maybe what you would think about doing in case you have the bountiful harvest we're hoping for. So just what I'm going to briefly talk about is just enjoying more of those vegetables, preparing them safely, storing, cooking, and preserving them. So just the idea then, we have this My Plate now. And so instead of the pyramid, it's kind of helping guide people about, maybe an estimate of how much of certain food groups you want to put on your plate. And the idea would be to get, around half fruits and vegetables to meet the vitamin and nutrient needs that we have. So, growing stuff can really help you, be inspired to use it and eat it. And so that's, that's why I'm so interested in the growing part and working along with Anne to do that. So just trying to shift to consumer vegetables, how can we incorporate these vegetables that we now have, so we could use some in place of the meat. I just saw a recipe where they actually use eggplant as a meat replacer. So that's an idea. Use the garnish as the main event, garnish with, like the meat as a flavor then, and then enjoying like them in most meals and snacks, and adding them extra to recipes. So it's kind of, like you have a broccoli and rice, you say you get one of those broccoli and rice packets, you're like, oh, there's broccoli in there, but maybe, it would obviously, there'd be a good flavor with that. So you could add more in. So kind of thinking about how you could incorporate them just by adding a little bit more could work with flavors. So preparing them safely, just make sure that you wash them. Sometimes you're like, well, this is not contaminated, but it could just, right when it's harvested or when you're preparing it. So just make sure that, just you rinse it off just to reduce anything. And you don't need soap. Running water is what is recommended as the best and is found to get off the best amount of nutrients. And so, or best amount of nutrients, you guys are like, oh no, best amount of the possible like bacteria and things like that. So we don't need soap. So preparing safely, one of the other things really wanted to highlight is when you're cooking vegetables and meats together, just really trying to keep the raw things, definitely keep the raw things separate from the raw meat. Okay, so like raw vegetables separate from that, because combining the two can, you can get a lot of cross contamination, and that will could affect your vegetables and make you sick. So just the idea is when you're putting like a burger on the grill, right? And then when you're taking off that burger, you want to use a separate plate, because that old plate that had the raw meat on it would have the bacteria. So you don't want to transfer that to anything. And that's the same with the cutting board then too. So if you're using it, you don't want to use the same cutting board for the vegetables as you use for the meat. Okay, so the 4 steps in food safety, it's clean, separate, cook, and chill. So like, we're cleaning it, we separate it from the meat, and then we cook it if we need to a safe temperature. And then the idea is after you cut it, then chill it. There's some things we can leave out on the counter and things like that, but after cutting, then it always needs to be chilled. So keeping that in mind also keeps that bacteria down so you guys don't get sick. Okay, so now we'll talk about the specifics. So okra, some people love this and some people are a little bit put off by the slimy. It has a slimy texture when it's cut. And so the idea is if, your spouse or something does not like that sliminess, idea would be you could cook it in such a way that it wouldn't be cut, because that's when the sliminess is really increased. And so that is actually good for us. It's like something that kind of goes in us and helps take out the cholesterol. So we like the sliminess, but just some people don't appreciate that in their food. So it doesn't bother me. It's a great thickener for soups, and okra can be eaten raw or cooked. So obviously if you eat them raw, it wouldn't have that sliminess, and they're low in calories, fat-free, high in fiber. And you just, like what Ann said, you'd want to get the smaller pods so that they're more tender. And they can be stored in a perforated plastic bag, but they don't last that long. In the fridge or something, just they'll start to turn brown. So you want to try to use those pretty soon after you get those. And so okra, I have to tell you guys too, on the okra, how sometimes if you do leave them too long, they'll become hard. I don't know if anybody's like a big long one, you can get them really big. And so you're like, oh no. So you can actually take out those seeds and they'll be black. And some people use those as a coffee substitute. So there's an option, but there's no caffeine. So it's probably why I didn't win out against the coffee bean. Okay, so just talking again about okra, great for thickening soups, gumbo, roast them. And that can help them because you're not cutting the ends. If you don't cut the ends, they're not as slimy. Or you could boil them whole just until tender. That's good. And they go really well with tomatoes. So that would be an awesome idea. And then here, a friend of mine, he's put them in his waffles. They really have a very neutral flavor, so they can go with that. And there's a recipe out there for okra marshmallows, which I've also made. And so there's lots of options with the okra. You get a lot. So sweet potatoes, just they would be ones to store at room temperature, and then eating the peel for most of the nutrients, and you can eat the greens raw or cooked. And we have them growing at work. I have them for lunch most days of the week. Actually, I've really started to like them. It's a very neutral flavor. In the Philippines, they're eaten fresh in salads, and they can also be cooked and sautéed down. They're great with just a little bit of balsamic vinegar or soy sauce. And so I do those a lot, and they're really good. And then I can enjoy those while they're developing the sweet potatoes, as long as I don't take all the leaves. So note to the self, right? So sweet potatoes, just 5 ways, maybe, oven fries. You might have thought them that way, cut them and then put them on either a rack on top of a pan, just so that the air can circulate a little bit, or you can just put them on the pan and just make sure they're not too close together so that they don't steam. So if you put them too close together, they'll be softer. And then if you give them space, they'll be crispier. So stuff them with walnuts, cranberries, or quinoa, or black beans. It's kind of a trend, doing it instead of the baked potato, using a sweet potato. They're also good in smoothies, savory oatmeal. There's recipes for that. And, they have that sweet flavor, so they really go well. And then adding them to pancakes or bread. And you can also eat them raw. I was just looking through some snack information, and they, like, the California schools were actually serving raw sweet potatoes as part of one of their snacks. So it's definitely done. And you can also just think about like shepherd's pie, maybe you could use sweet potatoes for the top sometimes, since that's plentiful in our summer. veggie chilies and then burritos too. So it's great with cinnamon. So southern peas, I was just gonna quickly talk about, three, just those Crowder peas. Then they have the more robust flavor. Cream peas, a little more mild, and black-eyed peas are somewhere in between. So you can kind of pick, what you'd like with the flavor. And they're really good with fiber and iron, just like the beans and peas are. And so these need to be cooked before eating. So you'd remove them from the pods, rinse, and then you cook them until tender. And you can also dry them. And so those would be, kind of you would see in the store, right? So you could dry them, and then you can keep them a lot longer than if they were fresh. So those, let me see if I can move to the next slide. Okay, so then just 5 ways that you might think about using those then. Really good with like lean pork or chicken and onions, green pepper and celery, or putting them kind of like mashing them like you would hummus and using them as a dip. Really good that way. And mixing them with corn and tomatoes. So the peas really good as those trio. Then with rice and tomatoes, and then cooking them with collard greens for good luck year round. And then cherry tomatoes, those you might know are high in lycopene, right? But it's even more so after it's cooking. So that lycopene is an antioxidant that will go in our body and help kill off bad things that are in there. So they're really good for us, and they continue to ripen after picking. And so the idea would be to try to not refrigerate those. And it's interesting, like I knew that, just even as I was growing up with like the big tomatoes, but I would sometimes, after you buy the cherry tomatoes, I would put them in the fridge, but their flavor will really continue to develop and the nutrients will develop as they sit out. And so they don't obviously last as long. So if they're starting to go bad, then maybe that's the time to throw them in your fridge before they, so you can still enjoy them. But just they found the nutrients continue to increase, as they're out there. So, and the flavor too. So once they're chilled, then I guess it just really, it harms those flavor profiles. So just a note on that. And then 5 ways, like you might have not thought about, with cherry tomatoes, I've actually seen them in a pie. So you could do like, mounting them in a pastry shell or roasting them until they start to burst. Just really rich flavors there that you can use with, in the tomato sauce then, or just as a sauce on something else, in soup and salad, and then tossing them with pasta and slicing them in half and then oven drying them. So you could do that kind of like sun roasted tomatoes, only oven roasted. That's what you have. I have to say, I used to work at a soup kitchen and we would serve hundreds of people. And one of the chefs there, I would just, we'd have like a bunch of these cherry tomatoes. And so she's like, okay, put them in the salad. So I was dumping them all in there. And she was like, you cannot do that. She's like, you have to cut them in half. Have you ever sat next to somebody who would bite into one of those and then it shoots on you? And so I had to get them all out and cut them up. I'll never forget that. But just, that would be something to keep in mind, I guess. So Jerusalem artichoke. These are cool. I have not gotten to try those. And so Julie is working on maybe potentially getting them in there with Anne's advice there. So you don't have to peel them. You can eat them raw or cooked. So it's kind of like sweet potatoes like that. And they're mild tasting, almost like a water chestnut. And then they have fewer calories in the potato and really good nutrition value. So they're really, a good option. And they have a high level of inulin. It's a prebiotic fiber, and that has medicinal properties. So kind of great thing with that. So these, just if we happen to grow them, you might have to send me some pictures and how you use them. But what I've seen when I did my research the most is that people eat them raw in salads. Some people pickle them. Roasting them also works. Cooking them and using them just like mashed potatoes. And then you can dry roast them like for 4 to 5 hours. So just some fun options with those. Okay, and then peppers, refrigerate them is recommended. That capsaicin is the one it's a really good for you compound that gives hot peppers their hot flavor. And so you might have heard spicy foods, they might increase your metabolism. And that actually looks like it's true, but it's a small amount, so it's probably not your go-to answer for everything, but it's kind of a fun fact. It actually helps, also helps you tolerate pain better. So kind of a fun fact. You're like, well, you're in pain if you eat something too spicy, but it can really help you with that. Some people actually use that capsaicin, like something with cream with capsaicin in it, to help with inflammation. So it's a really powerful thing. And just spicy peppers, remember then to wear gloves when cutting so water doesn't wash it away, which I've had to learn the hard way on that one. Don't touch your eyes. Right? And then it comes from actually the inner pith and the rib of the pepper, not so much the seeds. Some people think, oh, it's the seeds, but it's that pith, like, when you cut a pepper and there's kind of like that white part that strips. So that's in hot peppers, that's kind of where a lot of the spiciness is. So bell peppers, they don't have that spiciness, and they are very delicious also. So they can be used if you don't like the spicier things as much, and they have a lot of vitamin C, more than an orange. So sometimes you don't think about peppers, but a lot of vitamin C. And then most green ones will turn red if they're left on the vine long enough, which makes sense why the red ones kind of cost more, because the farmer has to let them sit there and watch until they get red. So the nutrients increase as they get red, and they get sweeter too. So a lot of people have found that just the red are easier to digest. And that makes sense, I guess, because it's riper. If you ate a raw banana, it might be really hard on your stomach, but something that's more, like a really soft, like ripe one, probably be easier to digest and digest quicker. So that's an option. Okay. And then just some ways, stuffing them, delicious. You can just have fun with that, throw in some rice and beans, mix it together and stuff it with that, or see what you have in the fridge for leftovers, who knows? There's a lot of things that could go really well in that. And then raw with hummus, really good. Using them as a stir fry. So you could have another bag of frozen stir fry vegetables. You just start those peppers a little bit early and then add the frozen ones in. You can use them in omelets or frittatas, and then roasting them too. So I have not tried this yet, but I always intend to. So basically just to roast them, all you'd use is that gas flame, or you could put them under the broiler until the skins start to separate from the flesh. And then you'd have roasted red peppers or roasted green peppers. And then those add that flavor to like the peppers, then add flavor to like salads and salsas and sandwiches, pepper relish. So there's lots of fun things you can do with that. So to test the ripeness of eggplant now, it's a great summer one. I think push on the eggplant with your thumb, and want it, it should spring back. So if it doesn't, or it shouldn't spring back, excuse me. So that's how you will know that it's ready then. So storing that, 1 week in the refrigerator unwrapped would be best. And it contains a lot of water. So you might see some recipes, they say to salt it and things like that and let it sit for a while. And you will find, like, if you do skip the step, then you just have a little more water kind of in your dish. And so that, you can do whatever you want. It's not going to harm you one way or the other. It's just that's, like sometimes if you put it in place of like noodles for lasagna or something like that, you might have like a waterier lasagna. So that's why they say to salt it a little bit sometimes before you cook it, to draw out some of that water. And then I gotta tell you guys, it's kind of a fun fact, but it's actually richer in nicotine than any other edible plant. And so I thought that was kind of a cool fact. But luckily, it's very, very small compared to even like passive smoking. So you need a lot of eggplant to equal a cigarette. So I just thought that was kind of a cool fact and kind of random. But okay, don't let that prevent you from eating, because there's a lot of nutrients in eggplant. So 5 ways on that: slicing them in browns, coating them with like egg whites and breadcrumbs, and then you could do sprinkle them with Parmesan and then bake them. Or I've seen them used as like pizza breads, right? And be a really low carbohydrate option since there's no carbohydrates. And bake them whole, in half, roast them, microwave them. Sometimes you're just really tired at the end of the day and you want an eggplant. So you can just poke that thing and stick it in the microwave and then cook it that way. And there'll be some moisture that'll come out of it, and it's very neutral flavor, and you could just add it in stuff, or you could puree it, make it a dip or something like that. Then also, like I mentioned, eggplant lasagna, and then ratatouille is a common dish that has summer squashes and tomatoes in that. So that's how you could use like your cherry tomatoes, and then you get some summer squash. And there's also eggplant bacon. It has things like liquid smoke and a little bit of maple syrup. And so I've seen that done too. Lots of fun options. And then preserving vegetables, kind of what Anne said about hydroponics. Like I could do a separate presentation on this. But I just wanted to kind of some key things, right? Just make sure to start with high quality vegetables when you're freezing them. Freezing them within like, right away, not after they've been sitting in the fridge for a really long time. Washing them, and vegetables, then there are like fruits you can just freeze, but vegetables, they need to be blanched before freezing usually. And there are some that are exceptions to that, but the idea would be to boil them just for a little bit, like a minute. Each vegetable has a different time, but it's kind of until the color really intensifies. Then you stop the boiling and dump them in some cold water to stop enzymes. So otherwise they'll continue to like keep ripening as they are in the freezer. And you're like, well, we don't want that because then that nutrients will start to diminish too. And so that's blanching will stop it. So you could put it in there, but it might not, taste as good, or it might have less nutrients that way. So that's a way you can do that. And some people are, like cherry tomatoes, if you want to freeze them, then you can put them on a tray and then transfer them to freezer bags. That's one way you can do that so they don't get all clumped together. Same with like bell pepper slices. So just with drying, then the calories don't change. They have the same amount, just more concentrated form. So if you think about like dried plums, the fiber doesn't change either. So, there's still a lot of fiber in there. And then some nutrients can be lost because you lose vitamin C when you heat it. And so if you use heat when you're drying it, then the vitamin C would decrease. And blanching is also recommended just to enhance the quality and safety. Sometimes when you dry things, then they might continue to deteriorate too. So just the idea would be to blanch them would be the best case. And then just to dry some vegetables, like say you wanted to do those cherry tomatoes or something like that, you can use a dehydrator or an oven. So the oven, like 140 degrees Fahrenheit or the lowest setting that you have, and then allow like a moisture to escape. So you need enough heat to draw out moisture and also adequate air circulation. I've tried in the Florida summer, actually dried stuff on, like I put a pan in my car on the windshield. And so that's probably not the safest or the best option because this way would control it. But something, sun-dried, right? Okay, so peas, leaving those, you'd want to leave in the pods until the plants have died down if you're going to dry those. But before the pods have split open, because you don't want to lose the peas. And so the dried shelled peas can keep a really long time. So that's a nice thing. And then I do have to say too, I was testing recipes for a contest once, and one of the people had submitted a sweet potato fruit roll up, and it actually won. So there's just, like a lot of different ways you can use the deep drying the vegetables to make some delicious stuff. And then there's eggplant jerky. So if you get a lot of eggplant and you're just not so about it, maybe you would like it that way. There's okra chips too. So some ideas. All right. So just a couple of things on the vegetables. How I said a lot of them have to be blanched first. There are, which happens to be kind of the ones we're talking about. Onions don't have to be blanched. Either do cherry tomatoes. So you can just put them on that sheet pan and freeze them and put them in the freezer. And peppers, you don't have to blanch them either. So you could throw them in the freezer like they are, or you can cut them in the strips so they're easy to use. And then you could, and so there'll be limp when you take them out, right? So you want to try to really just remember that, those would be great for stir fries, but not maybe for just like a raw salad where you really want that texture. And sweet potatoes, those recommended cooking, until almost tender. And then that's when you'd want to freeze them. So okra, eggplant, you'd want to blanch, sunchokes, blanching them, and southern peas, if you're going to freeze them, blanch them also. Just it destroys those enzymes and then helps them so they don't start deteriorating. So canning would be one of those other things. You can can, all kinds of fruits and vegetables. You can can broth, you can can meats. But there's two methods, right? So there's the boiling water bath, and that's safe for jams and jellies. And then there's a pressure canning, and that's the only safe way to can vegetables, unless you have tomatoes, because they're a little more acidic, and then you have to add a little bit more, and that can help make them safe. So you just don't, the acidity and the heat helps prevent botulism, but the pressure canning can get it to a higher heat than just boiling can. And so because vegetables don't have as much like acid as the fruits do, that's why we need to use a pressure canning one. So just making sure, just like when you would freeze, try to, get them at the peak quality, which you guys probably could guess, just so that they'll be more likely to be delicious and safe. And then just remembering too, they can be just as nutritious as fresh, and same with frozen. So kind of a fun way to keep your vegetables year round. So pickling then, you can do it with a lot of those things we talked about, like the okra and the peppers. I guess you could do tomatoes, but just starting with clean containers, and then vinegar, pickling, salt, seasonings, canning supplies. It's a great way to preserve vegetables from your garden. Then there are two kinds. So they're like with pickles, there are brine pickles and there's quick pickling. So there's like the fermentation kind, they take several weeks, but they would have that naturally really good bacteria that people are looking for, and it is really good for us. And then the quick pickles, they have the hot vinegar solution and they take just a few days. So either one of those would be a great way to preserve cucumbers. And then, so that's all I have. I know there's a couple questions in the chat, but I'll try to send that evaluation. And then if you guys don't mind filling that out, that would be really helpful. We'd love your feedback. Really appreciate it. So thank you for coming. And now any questions? So let's see. And if you'd like to unmute yourself too, we can do that. Let me make sure you guys, that's an option.
Andrea, there's a question about getting the presentation via email. Are we going to post this on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll post it on YouTube, and I'll email you the link for that, so then you can have that to as a resource whenever you need it. And you guys will have to tell me like if you're still on. That's all we have today, and thank you for coming. But I would like to say too, if you guys have any fun different ways that you've used some of these vegetables, I would love to hear about it if you're still on. That would be interesting. And then Anne, I think a couple of people were just asking for, the copies of that. So we would have it on YouTube. And do you want to send me the gardening guide and I can send that out too?
Yes, and also I will also grab it right now. I should have done that while you were speaking. I didn't think about it. I'll grab it and put the link to ordering the garden guide. I'll put it in the chat, and then we can also pull that for the email. Just give me 1 second and I'll find it.
And then Elizabeth just asked, are the shade vegetables bad for you? I know that's nightshades, like there's a kind of a rumor, a pretty strong rumor about that, but they have so many nutrients. And I would, no, they're not bad for you. So yeah. And if you have a specific, I think there's something maybe with gout on that. So I'm going to do some more research, but right now, no, I don't think so. No.
Ooh, that's a good question. There's a question about getting that spicy pepper, whatever that is, off your hands.
Oh, how to do it?
Yeah. Is there a way to is there anything you can use?
Milk or vinegar. I've actually had this happen and I had to Google it, and it's happened to me multiple times since then. So I just got to wear gloves, but I always think I can avoid it, But so like I've tried like running water and you're like, it's still burning. So you can actually put your hand in milk and that'll help, or vinegar helps too. So that's
interesting.
I can tell you that for sure. Let's see.
All right, well, you guys know where to find us if you have any other questions. Our plant clinic is staffed pretty much every day. If you have any growing type of questions or any gardening questions at all, you can just call the main number that you see on the screen to our office in Bartow, and our master gardener volunteers are there to answer any gardening questions that you have.
All right. I really hope you guys have a really good day. And thank you for all taking your time to come. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we hope to see you at the growing and cooking with edible flowers, which is our next one in a couple of weeks. That'll be fun
Yeah, we're excited about that one. I've been taste testing.
too.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Bye.